We all dread the threat of nothingness, by which I mean the possibility, indeed the inevitability of something we know and love no longer existing. Even when what we know and love outlives us, it no longer exists from our perspective after we have died. The concept of heaven is largely conceived as a place where the threat of nothingness has been forever banished. But what precisely is nothingness, and how does it relate to its opposite, somethingness? I will answer this question by first examining the greatest, most absolute nothingness of all, the nothingness out of which the universe itself arose. The belief the universe has always existed was nearly universal among astronomers in the early part of the 20th century. The opposing theory that the universe has not always existed but had a beginning and likely an end only appeared in scientific form in 1931 in a paper written by a Belgian cosmologist and Roman Catholic priest, Georges Lemaitre. This idea never gained much traction, however, until in 1964 evidence for the Big Bang was discovered in the cosmic microwave background. Today, there is general agreement the universe had a beginning around 13.8 billion years ago and will likely have an end in the distant future. So what existed before the Big Bang? Well, what the Big Bang created was none other than the space-time manifold itself. So there was no time before the Big Bang. As astonishing as it seems, the universe was ex nihilo, meaning it came out of nothing, or at least next to nothing. But surely there had to be something before the Big Bang. The natural law known as the conservation of energy, where energy is neither created nor destroyed, but only transformed, has been vital to the success of modern science and technology. What this suggests is some great store of energy or power managed to exist apart from space and time before the Big Bang. It is, however, difficult to conceive of anything existing in a conventional sense apart from space and time. So instead of describing this energy as existing, I suggest we describe it as only potentially existing. Indeed, not only the potential for energy, but also for everything coming into existence later, such as life and consciousness. For something to be potential rather than actual is to transcend the categories of existence and non-existence. We would also be justified in describing this pure potentiality as eternal, but not in the sense of everlasting. Instead, it would be eternal in the sense of existing outside of or apart from space and time. Although nothingness was replaced by somethingness following the Big Bang, this pure potentiality continues to exist since new things continue to be actualized as the universe continues to evolve. Moreover, the potentiality resident within this initial nothingness is not the potential for just any and everything. It must include the potential for life and consciousness. This is an important point since the concept of potentiality is meaningless unless we answer the question, potential for what? Religious mystics such as Plotinus and Ibn Arabi have described the ultimate nature of reality as being or existence itself. They also viewed being itself in terms of pure potentiality, similar to how I have just viewed the nothingness out of which the universe arose. Ibn Arabi insisted he was not a pantheist since what he identified as the ultimate was not what exists, but existence itself. And what is existence without what exists, but quite literally, no-thingness, which is hardly distinguishable from what I mean by the term nothingness. So far, I have described nothingness as the initial state of things preceding the Big Bang. But not only did all things, including the universe as a whole, ultimately arise from nothingness, they will also inevitably return to nothingness. This is what I will call the threat of nothingness, or non-being. The first point I want to make is whether we regard something, anything, as mostly something or nothing, depends upon our perspective. The first European settlers of the North American continent regarded the land they settled as only potentially something, that is, essentially nothing, until through hard work and commerce they turned it into something, namely farms and towns. But the Native Americans who they displaced did not regard this land as potentially something, but as really something, their homeland. From the perspective of the individual human being, death poses the greatest threat of nothingness of all. If, however, we adopt the perspective of the human species as a whole, the mortality of individual humans is not a threat, but a blessing. Indeed, our bodies are genetically programmed to eventually die, since death in tandem with sexual reproduction are essential for the health and evolutionary progress of Homo sapiens as a species. And it is here that I will make my second point regarding the threat of nothingness. It is that death and destruction are essential for the actualization of new possibilities in the future. Here are just a few examples of what I mean. 100 million years after the Big Bang, the first stars, comprised solely of hydrogen and helium atoms, were formed. If these stars had never exploded into supernovas, heavier elements essential for life, such as carbon, would never have been created. Or if the dinosaurs had not gone extinct 65 million years ago, it is likely mammals would never have come to dominate the planet. Or if we human beings were immortal, eventually having babies would have to be outlawed, given the finite resources of our planet. Human potential would be thwarted by the old never being replaced by the young. In about 5 billion years, our sun will become a red giant, and then after another billion years, a white dwarf. Some estimates are that white dwarfs can last up to a quadrillion years before turning into the cinder of a black dwarf. Although human beings will have disappeared long before our sun becomes a white dwarf, because of their long life and stability, white dwarfs provide an excellent source of energy for future life forms. Future life forms may well regard the current stage of our sun as being too short-lived and unstable for life to depend upon and flourish. Thus, they would regard this early period in the life of our sun more in terms of what it lacks. But what happens when our universe winks out after the last black hole has evaporated into Hawking radiation? Somehow a new universe will be generated, since pure potentiality eternally exists apart from space and time. There are various cosmologies which support this point of view, but the one I find most attractive was proposed by Roger Penrose et al., called conformal cyclic cosmology, or CCC. Once the last black hole evaporates, the universe effectively loses all sense of space and time and reverts back to a state where space and time no longer exist. This in turn sets the stage for this nothingness at the end of the universe, actualizing into the somethingness of another Big Bang and another universe. It is not necessary, however, to adopt this or any other particular cosmology, but only to remember the nothingness of pure potentiality is always and everywhere becoming somethingness, either in part or in whole. Indeed, even in the hard vacuum of deep space, particles and their antiparticle pairs are constantly appearing and disappearing. And even after the universe evaporates away, the potential for somethingness, even whole new universes, still exists. I am borrowing a term from J.L. Schellenberg in naming the religious perspective suggested by my concept of pure potentiality resident within nothingness. The term is ultimism. According to Schellenberg, ultimism is the view something in the nature of things is ultimate. This something is the source of all value, meaning, and good. Or to use Paul Tillich's term, this ultimate something is, or at least should be, our ultimate concern. What I am suggesting here is this ultimate is not something but nothing. Or to be more precise, the no-thingness of pure potentiality. As stated earlier, this pure potentiality is usually framed by religious mysticism within the context of being or existence itself. What I have argued in this video, however, is it can also be framed within the context of the opposite of being, namely non-being. There are examples within the history of religion where nothingness has been invested with profound religious significance. Likely the greatest personification of nothingness among world religions is the third person of the Hindu Trinity, Shiva the destroyer, and especially his consort Kali, who personifies the greatest, most persistent path to nothingness of all. Yeah, you guessed it, time itself. Those who worship Shiva and Kali powerfully acknowledge the role of nothingness as essential to the unfolding of the cosmic dance. But even in the great monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, God is often viewed as much as a destroyer as a creator. And in the secular realm, there exists a strange fascination with nothingness. Distracts and entertains us as not creation and nurturing, but murder and mayhem, not utopias, but dystopias. This can be blamed on a host of societal and cultural factors, but maybe it has mostly to do with the nature of reality itself. I am not, however, trying to convince anyone of the goodness of nothingness. God forbid. Instead, the point I am making is in order for either good or evil to exist, nothingness must exist along with somethingness. Knowing this will not remove the dread and grief associated with the possibility and inevitability of what we know and love returning to nothingness. But it may temper it by the realization that what we know and love would never have come into existence in the first place if it weren't for nothingness.